This is so cool. I don't often get to interview my heroes because the truth is I don't have that many heroes left. Most of them at this point have died, and that was a bit dark. Pretend I didn't say that. But Frank has been an inspiration to me since I was a baby journalist, and he was a towering giant in the field, and he's still a towering giant in the field. And ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Frank Miller.
Thank you.
So we were reminiscing a little bit before we came up about the fact that we first met. I would have been 25, and I was a journalist in Britain who had seen what was going on at the time in comics and was trying to persuade people to let me write about it. And it was so hard. Just getting, I got to interview, well, Frank and I met because I got to interview him back then. But it was, they didn't get it. And it was like the world didn't get it. And I felt like a lone prophet standing on a mountaintop going, comics is happening! Look, Mouse, Dark Knight, Watchmen, Love and Rockets, it's all happening at the same time. The world is changing. And it was. What did it feel like for you being in the vanguard of that?
It was a very heady time. To come into comics when I did, which was, in the 1970s, I came into what seemed, basically it was like a field full of energetic talent, young talent, and a sense of doom hanging over the publishers. And I remember an editor, one of the first editors I met, simply shook his weary head and he said, "What are you doing here, kid? Everybody knows we're going to be out of business in a year." And there was a sadness to the business. But there was, I think that the elders of the field were generally, except for a few visionaries, I'll get to them in a second, were thinking of this as what had become a much despised story form. There were wounds left over from the 1950s when comics were considered a link to juvenile delinquency, and a source of just a disreputable, horrible trash form that had made many of the publishers and the practitioners of the craft almost ashamed to admit what they did for a living. At the same time, there were these people who never lost faith. There were the craftsmen who kept turning out terrific work. And early on, by looking up a name in the phone book, I was able to meet Neil Adams, who I regard as kind of a Moses-like figure in the history of comics, because he straddled the generation that created comics and the generation that was part of the new wave, that began the new wave. And his shop, his advertising art shop in Midtown Manhattan was a place where comic book artists and would-be comic book artists and people who didn't do comics anymore but came from it would work, they would be able to get advertising work in order to survive, and they would socialize and keep the faith going. I've got to say the comic book community at the time was very, very welcoming. People were not much in competition so much as fellow voyagers, fellow warriors. And to, you know, to be invited like I was to what was called Upstart Studios by Walter Simonson and Howard Chaykas, and to Sherman, and to learn from them and learn with them and we all challenged each other was to be part of the future of comics. And when I think of how it's changed now and how robust the field has gotten, it's still.
I had dinner with Walt a few nights ago and mentioned I was going to be seeing you, and he said that it was so strange for him because you turned up, you were down from Vermont, you were a kid who wanted to be, what were you, 19?
I was not yet 20 when I got here.
So you were 19, going on 20, desperate to draw comics, desperate to create comics, and he said, you know, I mean, he didn't say that they gave you a place in the studio out of pity, but it definitely wasn't like they were going, welcome one of the towering giants of the field. They were like, here's this kid. And he said, and then the speed with which you ran out ahead, the imagination, the way that you grew and grew so fast. What changed? Was part of it just being in New York? Was it being surrounded by your peers? Was it actually having arrived in a world of comics?
Yes, and yes. It mostly was the opportunity, but also let me put it this way, it was the advice and guidance of Walter Simonson and the arguments with Howard Chaykin. and also the gruff tutelage of Neil Adams in particular. And beyond that, there was the city itself. To you know, be in the city that I think I was born to come to, and to experience it. All of a sudden, so many things about comics made sense to me. It's you know, if you haven't been on a rooftop in Manhattan, you really haven't experienced Steve Ditko. And you really don't know why he put all those damn water tanks in there. They're there. And so it was everything, since the industry was so located within New York. You know, now it's bi-coastal, it's all over the place, and it's glad to report global. The particular opportunity I had probably doesn't exist in the same form now. But I've got to say the biggest thing was the comics community itself. That I was greeted with patience and generosity. Anything else isn't worth remembering.
One of the things that fascinates me, and you know, I can talk about this, I came into comics about 8 or 9 years after you, but I experienced very much the same thing. Was back in the 70s and the 80s, you didn't do comics for either fame or fortune. You know, it was more the equivalent.
Surely not for fortune.
Definitely not for fortune. Definitely, it would be like telling people you were going to Patagonia to become a famous movie star. There's no. It's like, no, this is as obscure and weird a place as you can be.
Or it would be like saying that you want becoming famous doing things that hurt little kids.
There's, you definitely, but I found when I came in that there was a power to that, in that it's not that nobody cared exactly, but that nobody minded. You're in this sort of industry that everybody kind of thinks may be dying.
Yeah.
And if you're there anyway, if you're gonna do something interesting and weird and people seem to like it, nobody is gonna try and correct you. Nobody's gonna micromanage you. Nobody's going to tell you what to do.
Absolutely, and opportunities arose and arise in the strangest ways, professionally and artistically. And that for instance, was I was assigned a Spider-Man team-up comic to do that featured Daredevil as a guest star, and I did that, and the terrific artist Frank Springer did the ink work on it, and I really enjoyed the idea that this guy was blind. But Daredevil had been drawn by the same artist, Gene Colan, who had done a wonderful job of it for decades. And he for whatever reason, ran screaming off it. I think he finally had done enough of them. And I went into Jim Shooter's office and put my name in the ring for it. And he thought that was audacious of me. It turns out that he believed in rewarding audacity, and I managed to get I managed to get the assignment and on this third string Marvel comic. And again, it's very important to grab a loser if you get a chance, because anything you do right is going to surprise everybody.
It was right up there with Jack Kirby transferring to DC Comics as this sort of Marvel star and saying to them, "What's your worst selling comic?" And them saying, Jimmy Olsen. And him saying, "Go, give me that."
Yeah, and he made it the best comic they were publishing.
And Daredevil changed everything. And it also let you start rewriting the rules. It led to Ronin, it led to Dark Knight. And from there, it just seemed like every Frank Miller project was a complete reinvention of what Frank Miller projects could be. Sin City, Martha Washington, these things, were just absolutely of their own. I've always been fascinated by Sin City, because that felt like you were just doing this thing for your own amusement completely. It was like
you've got it. That's exactly what it was. Sin City was the it was the comic book I most wanted to do, and by the way, still is. And it because I've always been a complete nutcase for old crime stories and old crime movies, and with Sin City, I knew that I wanted to do it in black and white. One reason being that Lynn Garley wanted to move on to doing her own paintings, and I really didn't particularly want to be working with anybody else in the colors, because our collaboration was so intense that I thought it was really time for me to do a black and white. But also, since I wanted to do Sin City, why not let it be in black and white? And I approached Mike Richardson at Dark Horse, and he immediately said yes. And I said, but still being a little spooked because nobody was doing anything that didn't have tights. I introduced it quietly in their anthology.
It was Dark Horse Presents,
Yes,
wasn't it? It was
and-
this little sort of thing.
Yeah, and snuck it in little 8-page increments, then 10-page increments, then 12-page increments, and then a 48-page increment. Sin City was launched, and then from then on, the chains were off, and I felt that I felt the joy and the responsibility of having freedom and authority, and learning my way. And eventually, I got around to telling that story about that old Greek battle that I saw in a movie once that I really wanted to get to.
So here we are in what we in England used to call cinemas, and of course both Sin City was also the thing that tumbled you. Well, actually, if we're going to ignore RoboCop 2.
Come on, let's spend the rest of this straight.
But Sin City was the point where you went back into movies with power, with clout, and with joy.
And again, I mentioned Neil Adams, I've mentioned a couple of others, but there always seems to be angels when you need them. And an angel in my life was Robert Rodriguez, who, when he approached me about Sin City, he was not the first. And I just flatly rejected everybody else because I just didn't want Sin City to turn into something that fit what I thought was the Hollywood mold. And then I met Robert and we filmed one scene, and my entire point of view about movies and how they're made and everything was transformed overnight, and that began the adventure of a lifetime. I've got nothing but joyful memories.
We're getting right towards the end. I thought I'd just throw a few names at you and just see what memories they provoke. Will Eisner.
Oh, Will Eisner, I first met Will Eisner at the San Diego Comic Book Convention, which is where, he was there every year. And at dinner, he and I started arguing, and I swear we never stopped. Over such minuscule pieces of storytelling, like how much story content would be in a single panel, placements of the word balloons, but he never lost this absolute passion to debate every last infinite aspect of comics, and even their role in the arts and everything else, because I would talk about the parallels between cinema and comics, and he would argue that there were that I was wrong, that comics were a medium completely divorced from cinema, and I would point to his own work.
It used to drive me nuts because he would say, it's proscenium theater.
Yes.
This is West End theater. I got everything from the West End theater. And you're like, you stole it from Orson fucking Welles.
That's what I do.
never
I
said
pull
fucking
out
to
the
Will.
spirit to prove him wrong. Because the Citizen Kane references in the spirit, you'd have to be blind not to see them.
And with that, I think we have used up exactly our time. But we can creep into another one of these cinemas and do the same thing again, only with different words.
Can I trust you?
No, absolutely not. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Frank.